there, everybody. I'm Ashley Hunt, Senior Project Management Instructor here at Stormond Epic Live. And the blog that I'm doing today is all about giving feedback. This is much more team and person oriented, but the goals of feedback are really important, and it's necessary as a project manager to be able to give your team effective feedback to keep the project on track. So this blog is all about the importance of giving and receiving feedback as a project manager. Very first thing to be aware of is the stats. Now, I'm not necessarily going to read these all to you, but I found it shocking. 39% of employees report not feeling appreciated at work. Unbelievable. Employees are 2 times as likely to be actively disengaged if they're ignored by their managers. Only 58% of managers think they give enough feedback. 65% of employees said that they wanted more feedback, and 78% of employees said being recognized motivates them on their job. And if you want to check out all of these, you can go to the link below and check it out, officevibe.com, based on employee feedback. Now, the statistics, while shocking, can be overcome if we start to determine the best times to give feedback. Certainly, we have to determine what's the right time to do so. If you're giving feedback to a team member when they're frustrated by something, or they're busy, or they're in a bad mood, certainly don't want to give feedback to an angry person because they're not likely to take feedback very well. Make sure the time, place, and circumstances are appropriate. And remember to offer feedback only if the individual has the power to make the needed change. And I look at this as, is this an ability issue or a willingness issue? And we need to figure that out before we direct our feedback in a specific way. Do not offer feedback for the sole purpose of putting the other person on the spot. Try to remain supportive at all times. I'll never forget working in a large organization and seeing a manager point to somebody at their desk and say, hey, come on, I need to talk to you in my office. Close the door, put the blinds down, and everybody went, oh, that's not good. We want to be sure that we're scheduling these on a regular basis, either for the good or to try and fix something that the employee is able to fix. How to give feedback. It's important to be as descriptive as possible. Provide specific information and examples. That means you yourself have to prepare to give feedback to the employee. Try not to use labels like you're being unprofessional or you're being irresponsible, because now the employee just feels like a child who's being scolded. We want to describe the individual's behavior and not add any feelings to it. And it's important to remember not to refer to absent third parties, like so-and-so said this about you. Don't speak for other people. Refer to only how you feel about a situation, not how another team member feels about that person as well. That's really important because that can damage inter-office relationships and relationships on your project team, even if you don't name names. How to receive feedback. What if you're the one who's getting feedback from your sponsor or your customer? Well, if you're receiving feedback, listen very carefully, and I mean listen actively, and ask questions when you're unclear about something. Try and paraphrase the message in your own words. So this is what I'm hearing, or this is what I think I'm hearing you say, so that the person delivering the feedback knows that you've received the message. This is the hardest one, is to take time to sort out everything that you've heard before responding. Because ultimately we're human, so if the feedback isn't that good, we're going to maybe take offense, or we're going to be a little upset, or our face is getting a little hot or red. Just take a breath and try and think about what's been said before you respond. And if you're really upset, then it's perfectly realistic to ask for a follow-up appointment after you have time to adjust the information and get it scheduled as soon as possible to discuss the issue further. Different types of feedback are relevant for different situations. They are broken down into these categories: reinforcing versus corrective feedback, formal versus informal, and solicited versus unsolicited feedback. But when we take a look at the breakdown, reinforcing is the good. This is praise. This is what those statistics were saying many employees don't get. They don't get the high five. They don't get the thank you. They don't get the specific feedback that says, this is what you specifically did really, really well. People need to hear that. Whereas corrective feedback shows people where they've maybe made a mistake and you work together to change or improve, whether that's training or maybe they weren't even aware that they were doing something that they shouldn't. And therefore, we want to provide that corrective action or corrective feedback in as a specific and kind way as possible. Informal versus formal. The difference between a formal approach is really appropriate when there's discipline or there's documentation or appraisals or performance reviews or, let's face it, sometimes we have to give feedback on the same thing over and over and over again. At that point, it now becomes formal and documented. But informal is also appropriate when the feedback, you've got an opportunity to give good feedback, when it can be delivered quickly or soon after the behavior or action occurs. And that's kind of an informal thing if you see something going down and you're like, I better mention that now, when it doesn't necessarily need to be formal. And that could be, I really appreciate what you did today, or hey, I noticed, this, that, or the other thing. If you'd like to talk more about it, or if you need some help from me, please let me know. Now, obviously, solicited, you're asking for it. This is where you go to your team and you say, hey, we're going to do a 360-degree review. I'd really like for you to give me some feedback on these specific items. And it's planned and it's solicited. Unsolicited is when you're providing information about another's behavior that they may or not be aware of and that they didn't ask for. So the giver plans, the giver of the feedback plans and leads the process, but the recipient may really need some time to absorb it. Feedback isn't always the easiest thing to do. And in fact, a lot of managers are finding it very difficult to give feedback. For a lot of folks, giving good feedback is really easy, but giving constructive feedback can be a bit difficult. So put together a plan and know the specifics of what you're trying to accomplish and try and buffer that with some good behavior as well, and work together with your team in order to generate a plan that you can implement then the feedback right away, and certainly plan to follow up with them after the fact. Hopefully this helped you out, just a little blog on feedback, but maybe it was enough to just say, hey, you know what? I haven't met one-on-one with my team in a long time. Sit down and document some feedback, the good and maybe the developmental, and meet with your team one-on-one and provide them the needed feedback. For everybody here at Stormwind Studios, I'm Ashley Hunt. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you in class.